like you say, throughout Johnson's tenure, he broke that fundamental promise to be a people's government. And like, to lots of people, that's completely unsurprising because like we've tracked Johnson's career and life probably more intimately than any politician in recent memory. Like, he has been a national fascination. But like you say, through the process of Brexit, the Vote Leave campaign, the 2019 election, he sort of cleansed his image in a way. He separated himself from the Conservative Party. Partly as well, he was kind of a cultural figure rather than a political figure. You know, he'd been on Have I Got News for You. He leverages his humour in a way that accesses people in a way that no other politician can. He's sort of an intentional, bumbling idiot, right? So people don't see him as like the old Etonian, former Bullingdon Club man that he is. You know, he's cut from the same cloth as David Cameron. He's more elite than Rishi Sunak, even despite the fact that Rishi Sunak is the wealthiest person ever to have been Prime Minister. And we saw that, you know, that sort of inner identity of Boris Johnson come to the fore in exactly how his government behaved during the pandemic. And I mean, an interesting fact is that it'd be interesting if you can find the clip of this documentary where Boris was approached with this fact. Apparently, whenever he comes into contact with a former Bullingdon Club member, Boris runs up to them and goes, "Buller, buller, buller."
Right.
You know, the sort of primal chant of the Bullingdon Club.
I remember the dinners being incredibly, you know, drunken and you know,
ending up with smashing up restaurants.
Well, yes, and so the abiding feeling was of deep self-loathing, and you know what.
I've talked to a number of the people in the photograph,
God, have you? All right.
And they say that when they see you these days, you go up to them and say, "Buller, buller, buller."
Right? Do they?
Yes, they do.
It may be that I do, in a satirical way.
Isn't he also known to have, you know, what is it for the silence that they have, the secrecy?
Mutter, yeah.
Hasn't he been known to mutter that as well?
Yeah, whenever he's asked about the Bullingdon Club, he goes, "A murder.
Right.
Because that's the whole idea that the Bullingdon Club protects its own. And Johnson hasn't got rid of that. I mean, he said that, you know, the Bullingdon Club was a mistake, you know, it was, I think he said it was toffishness and twittishness, typical Johnson phrasing, which sounds like it means a great deal, but actually means very little because he just replicated that mentality when he got into Downing Street. So yeah, he very much practices the Bullingdon Club code even to this day.
So he went from this small circle inside Oxford where it's all secret and they're helping each other out, and he's just basically brought that into public life.
Yeah, basically. I read a beautiful phrase which was Boris Johnson went from smashing up restaurants in Oxford to smashing up the nation. That's effectively what's happened.
Wow. So he uses Latin to be evasive, to make himself seem that an illusion that he is talking about something quite grand when he's not at all, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he's admitted, he was at a Latin-themed charity event, which again, I you know, that's not the sort of thing that I've been invited to ever. No? I don't know about you, Ava. But at this event, or after it, I think, he admitted that Latin words are intentionally evasive because they sound as though you're speaking with great intellect because you're referencing something that very few people know, but you may actually be talking complete nonsense. And I think actually this is something that I really tried to get across, was that these people are sort of educated in the art of linguistic distraction. It's the same with Jacob Rees-Mogg. He talks in grand phrases and throws in references to, you know, classical literature. But if you boil it down to its essence, it's still the same reactionary, populist, divisive nonsense that the likes of Nigel Farage is spouting. And in many cases, even people further to the right of Nigel Farage. I think it has a deeply corrosive effect on democracy because we're kind of taught instinctively to trust these people, to trust people who are members of the aristocracy who talk well, who, are well educated. And yet they're using that to spread a really poisonous ideology. And so they're basically getting away with it. I've always said that Boris Johnson would never get away with, that a working class person would never get away with doing what Boris Johnson does at PMQs. He turns up, or used to turn up, with his tie halfway up his chest, half untucked, his hair looking like an exploded haystack. Can you imagine a working class person turning up to the dispatch box looking like that? They'd be torn to bits in the press. But this speaks to our innate worship, in a way, of aristocracy in this country, that we think that they can do no wrong. And we've got to kind of train ourselves not to think that. I mean, we've been given plenty of evidence in recent years why that isn't true, and why the aristocracy is actually using that position to both further its own ambitions and spread deeply divisive politics.
Well, you call it a sycophancy, right? So that's also come about through him just being ubiquitous, I suppose. As you said, he was on Have I Got News For You, and we got used to kind of this lovable, affable character. And even in the way that we refer to him, I mean, he's known as Boris. What other politician do you call by their first name?
Yeah, what's his full name? Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson, man of the people.